so we've had these traditional ways of teaching. I don't know how to even start to describe this stuff. My wife's pregnant right now. We're having another, this is number 5 of our 5 kids. And, putting on this necklace that I'm not wearing now, but I guess I'm wearing this one. Just putting it on today reminded me of the fact that, we have very strong taboos about a woman that's pregnant can't wear a necklace. She doesn't wear bracelets. How she stands or doesn't stand in a doorway, how she hangs something up, how somebody sits in front of her, are all taboos. These are all rules, just something that's very simple, little, seemingly simple, right? But if you can imagine everything you do from the time you get up in the morning through the time you go to bed, and even your way that you look at your sleep and your dreams, are all driven by a way of thinking, by a set of philosophies. All those things together, if you're a real believer in it and you follow it, make for a very, maybe a strict way of living, but it also makes for a very cohesive, good way of living. We had very clear ideas of right and wrong in our ancestors' and elders' times, and people didn't really deviate without strong ramifications, So we didn't have jails in our experience. We didn't have, there were very strong social norms that you're supposed to follow. All that teaching, started at birth, and it's part of what happened in the wintertime in our traditional stories. It's part of just everyday references back to those stories, because we have these full sets of stories, all these histories of how the world came to be, how everybody interacts, how landforms came to be, why critters look the way they do, what have you. And all those have teaching in it. And so what you would hear from an old-time Indian is, jokes and reminders and what have you about all these different, just a reference to the stories. Oh, was there a crack in the rock? And that's a big joke. Everybody laughs, right? So it's part of a story why there can't be, why there's no secrets. Secrets are not even believed to be possible by our ancestors. They knew better. Americans think you can have secrets all the time. It's not true. Just a little aside. With that said, we're now stuck, of course, with, this is a Head Start funded classroom, for instance, that we were talking about, we're having, full-blown Chinook immersion in, no English allowed. Try doing that under, administration where there's no child left behind, in this belief that English trumps all and what have you. I mean, these are, we've had to negotiate some very interesting things, and I'm sure you all do too. So, in the context of, classrooms and thinking about how to teach our kids today in a different world, in a much different situation, because we do have these nice traditional environments like the canoe journey where we're able to teach in a different way. But, the one place we have our kids, and we'll just call them a captive audience, right? The one place we have them is in the school. And so we've really looked hard at how are we going to address that and bring these traditional sensibilities forward into a school setting, and what we've ultimately settled on in terms of the people that I've associated with myself with, the programs we developed at Grand Round, the things that we are trying to further in terms of Chinook community, Shoalwater Bay community, where I'm now working, what have you, are basically, a culture and place-based curriculum. So I know place-based curriculums are something that, people are quite aware of and think about. But, we've tried to look at, what are the standards? And, basically insert a native component, an Aboriginal component before anything else in each of these. If it's at preschool level and they're looking at themselves first, they're learning about themselves and then their family and then their community, well, we're absolutely compelled to teach that from a Aboriginal sensibility first. How did people think about themselves, right? from a Native perspective, we have more than one kind of spirit or soul in us, so that's the sort of thing we're trying to teach, the way that you're supposed to, interact then with family. A little aside to that is in the preschool that we operate, or that's operating there in Grand Round, is that we, everybody's called by familial terms, right? So, this is how people lived in a house like this. People were all interrelated and communicated that way, right? And just by calling someone your auntie or your grandmother or whatever it is, builds a different kind of relationship than, how people just typically interact in America today. So all those things are, lead to, I think, a very nice feeling, a more comfortable at times environment for learning, just a nice thing. So thinking about culture and place-based curriculum, that's kind of the overall goal, looking at, how, really how people, how each of our Aboriginal communities and what have you are tied to the place and how we perceived it. And, then looking outward. And, of course, we had all these, what was referred to with these trading networks and whatever. We had very strong opinions of how, about our neighbors and about people beyond that and about the non-Indians that came and whatever. So, these are all, it's almost like it's wide open how we can approach this stuff for teaching. On the biggest picture, so we know we want to do culture and place-based curriculum. That's kind of been the philosophy. On the biggest picture, we actually have based all of our curriculum development in Grand Round around water. Water's pretty much the most sacred thing that we have. When you get up in the morning, you're supposed to you drink water. That's the first thing you do in the morning before you eat. You drink water. If our kids are having a hard day, they're told to go over. And, we'd always keep cold water either out of a faucet or in a bowl, and they're taught how to use that water to, just to kind of wash the bad stuff off of them. Our ancestors believed in washing twice a day. They washed in the morning and they washed at night, and that's as much about physical, it's sort of about physical cleanliness, but it really has a spiritual side to it, how they dip. In fact, we have, in our most basic sensibilities, there's 5 directions for our people, and it's kind of the cardinal directions, and then it's kind of yourself is the 5th direction. It's this inward thing. So when we go out to dip in the morning, or if you're dipping for a spiritual reason, people will dip in the water. They'll come up facing to the east, to the south, to the west, to the north, and then they look up. But they're, literally, it's spiritual cleaning just by being in the water. So we had sweat houses, and that's what people think about, I think, a lot of times for spiritual, cleaning. But just the creek, is such an important thing for that. And so, we utilize that in the classroom. This is just illustrating how important water is, but we literally built almost all of our curriculum around this concept of water. It states then of course the locations where it is, right? Because whether it's at fruition in the ocean or whatever, or up in the headwaters of these mountains, and as it travels along, we've literally built an entire curriculum around how water interacts with the environment, being able to focus on all of the areas associated, the Aboriginal sensibilities of them, how humans interact with it, the states of it, whether it's frozen or, what have you. But it's been a really interesting process to sit and work with people, elders, other folks that were compelled by what we were doing, and come up with, these bigger educational philosophies that we have then looked at, what's the state standards, and just really worked to build, to build curriculum that's meeting state standards, but more importantly to us, meeting, the opportunity really of having our kids in a place where we can be educating them in really a traditional manner. With that said, speaking language in that context, it is amazing just what speaking our language or another language does for the minds of these kids. Because our kids will say things to us in this language that, you know, in my experience, I've only heard from elders, and I've never said to them, and I absolutely believe that it is something just built into language. So something you were saying, you know, when you lose language, there is a lot lost.